our broadcasting. However, we will continue our coverage of what is happening on through our streaming platforms. That is our website, abc7.com. We will also be streaming on our website, abc7.com. You can just type in abc7.com/live, and that will take you to our live streaming coverage of, once again, unrest hitting downtown Los Angeles amid a nationwide day of protest.
This has been Eyewitness News with breaking news.
Okay, we continue our continuing coverage of breaking news in downtown Los Angeles and all across our area on this day of protest against President Trump and his administration's policies on a variety of issues. This has largely been a peaceful day of protest, but as you can see on your screen, that has quickly changed. The LAPD says they gave a dispersal order to the crowd that had lingered past the 2 p.m. close of what had been a long and peaceful demonstration in downtown Los Angeles. They said their officers were, quote, taking rocks, bottles, and bricks. So a little before 4 o'clock today, about 3:45, 3:50, a dispersal order was given. Officers began moving in, and we are seeing what that has now devolved into in parts of Los Angeles. And we do have reporters on the ground.
Yeah, this comes after a day of the No King's Day protests, one of the largest protests in history. But as you mentioned, Jory, this has turned into something not so peaceful anymore. And we want to get to the ground, if we can, to check in with Eyewitness News reporter Tim Caputo, who is live in downtown LA. Tim, we heard those flashbangs in your shot earlier today. You know, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? And where exactly are you, just to give the viewers a better idea of where you're standing?
So we're on Main Street, practically above the overpass over the 101. So technically we're on Arcadia Street, but kind of halfway in between. CHP has essentially drawn a line here at Arcadia Street to keep these folks from being on the overpass or closer to some of those federal buildings where the protests began. Take a look behind me. You know, as they were singing and dancing and some of the folks out here were playing music, something happened with this gentleman here. To call him a gentleman is a stretch, but he apparently interacted with CHP. They went into the crowd, they grabbed him. He is now detained. We didn't see exactly what happened. Will, come over here and take a look, because this is part of the reason is you have a lot of folks at this intersection here. Many of them focused on the CHP officers themselves, some just kind of lingering and hang out in the crowd. There are certainly hurling insults and yelling and chanting in the direction of CHP, and occasionally, like we saw a soccer ball thrown into the crowd. Obviously that gentleman, something happened with him where they took him into custody. We don't know exactly what happened, but the crowd by and large standing off to the side, waving their flags and holding their signs. The protest, which was at one point moving and marching, has certainly changed in a lot of aspects as police issued that dispersal order and unlawful assembly a little while ago, and while it didn't disperse necessarily, people were moved out of the immediate area outside of the federal buildings, the Metro Detention Center. So what's happened is where we're standing here, as you hear some of those flashbangs keep going off, we are on Arcadia on the opposite side. We'll get a shot across the street here. And some of the biggest action at the moment happening over on Temple Street, which is a couple blocks over from where we're standing. Obviously, because of all that going on, it's even more important for CHP to keep this crowd as far away as possible so they don't get involved in that mix. But clearly, the crowd over there, they're trying to push it back. As you heard mentioned, obviously water bottles, apparently rocks, and other pieces of cement thrown at some officers, and that's why we've got to the point where they're getting the crowd to disperse and an unlawful assembly. Whether or not the crowd will disperse remains to be seen. It doesn't appear so at this point. Obviously, police here trying for moving beyond that, but what we've seen over and over again, at least in this area, if you look to the left here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people standing 3 or 4 feet away from this line of officers, yelling at them, talking to them. There's obviously not much interaction or dialogue back and forth. CAP just making sure that nothing violent happens, and if it does, that's when they come out of this line in this formation, grab someone or try to grab someone, and then get back in this line to keep the folks here. You know, it should be noted too, we've talked to families, we've talked to young people, we've talked to older folks as well. There are people of all ages that have come out here today. Obviously, a lot of people here over the course of the day. And when it comes to what's happening now, it remains to be seen what kind of turn this takes into the evening hours. The curfew is still in effect in a couple hours from now, but obviously, I'd imagine most of these folks are going to stay out here till 8 o'clock.
Tim, from where you're standing, since you've gotten there, has that line of law enforcement, have they moved closer to you? Have they tried pushing people away, or is it they've kind of stayed right where they are?
Once they pushed up, that's a good question too, because once they pushed up, what was it, like 345-ish, they came up all these streets. It goes Alameda, Los Angeles, Main Street, and they pushed up all the way across the overpasses to hold the line here at Arcadia, rather. Keep in mind, in preparation of this, CHP actually removed a lot of those scooters that are rentable and out here. And last weekend, when things got violent, some of those scooters were tossed onto the 101, onto the CHP vehicles below. At the moment, the 101 is still moving. Cars are still on it. They prevented any of the protesters from getting on the freeway itself, but obviously moving folks to this side where there aren't as many, or if any, entry or exit ramps onto the 101 is part of the purpose. The line itself has stayed strong here. We've seen them stop out, and obviously some reserves standing behind them, as one of them will maybe come off the line and somebody will fill that spot, but it has been a steady shoulder-to-shoulder line with their full tactical gear and their batons holding the line here for the better part of the last hour or so.
Tim, we know that so many people showed up early this morning, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., to get to downtown LA to be part of these protests. You arrived on scene, I want to say maybe an hour, 2 hours ago. What was it like getting to that area? Because we know that there are so many people in downtown LA who live there, who work there, maybe weren't part of these protests, maybe have events that they were planning on going to tonight. You know, what was the traffic situation in terms of getting to where you are?
So truth be told, I've been here practically every night since last Friday, so I've got a pretty decent lay of the land when it comes to accessing the areas that the protesters have centered around. Obviously in front of City Hall, whether it's Spring Street up to Main Street itself, those are absolutely packed. Opposite, Spring Street is one up from here, but you know what I'm saying. One on next to City Hall and then through the park on the other side, and then it goes down to Alameda. So accessing Union Station is fairly easy. Accessing other parts of the city is fairly easy. We're talking about a kind of centralized protest that have taken over the streets in these, several blocks in a row. It goes from Alameda up, and you see, well, let's point over here to Spring Street here. That's Spring Street, the one you're immediately looking at, that overpass there, and off in the distance it's kind of backlit, but you see the people standing up on Hill Street as well. That's North Hill Street, kind of overlooking the 101, and you get a good vantage point seeing all the way down the hill here and all the overpasses. Those areas are packed with people, but guess what? There are cars on those roads. So people are driving through. In fact, when we drove up to Spring Street itself, when we parked about 2 hours ago, you could drive through there. Sure, there are people in the street. You have to drive cautiously, as people were as they were driving by, but it's still accessible. It's not completely inaccessible. Obviously, the intersections like here, when you're talking about Arcadia and Aliso on either side of the 101, absolutely impassable at this point, whether it's police or protesters. So avoid this immediate area, but it doesn't mean the entire city's closed. Once you get farther north of here and further east of here, it's wide open.
Right, Tim, thank you. And we do want to say that as this is happening downtown, Metro putting out some notes. 6 Metro bus lines are being detoured in downtown LA. Metro encouraging riders to use rail. As of this point, only 1 rail station in downtown Los Angeles is closed. Buses that typically run downtown LA are detouring around the central business district, with most routes using either Figueroa to the west, Cesar Chavez to the north, Soto to the east, and Olympic to the south. And again, they say please consider using Metro Rail to travel within downtown Los Angeles, which we must remind you, you really only have 3 more hours to do. Less than that now, with the curfew set to go into effect once again at 8 o'clock tonight. LA Mayor Karen Bass put that into effect this past week, and it now continues through the weekend. We don't know if it's going to keep going beyond that, but as of now, indefinitely, that is in place for the near future until things calm down, which it is clearly not doing today. I think one of the hallmarks of the march today, of the No Kings protest march, was that they were going to keep things peaceful. They wanted to counter the narrative of what we had seen, the image of our city from last weekend and through the week. And up until 2 p.m., it was largely that. In fact, until close to 4 o'clock, it was largely peaceful. We didn't see any problems. We didn't see anyone detained. That quickly changed about 3:45 when we saw police on horseback move in. We saw lines across streets, and we saw one person being detained. And shortly after is where we began to see the conflict happen once again on the streets of Los Angeles.
And as we're showing you a live picture from Air 7, it's important to note, too, that there are not nearly as many people now as there were earlier this morning in that area, but at least 2,000 communities had protests planned across the nation for No Kings Day. We saw, of course, protests in downtown LA. We saw them in West Hollywood, Riverside, Long Beach, Studio City, Santa Clarita, just to name a few of them. And those protests were supposed to end at around 2 p.m. It's hard to tell if these protesters were the ones who were here all day or if they were part of the rallies, some of those rallies that were scheduled for downtown LA tonight as well. Yeah,
a lot of people have headed home. We had our Annabelle Munoz on the ground marching with those demonstrators as they made their way from City Hall down to Pershing Square, then over to Figueroa, just off the 110 freeway. There was some concern that demonstrators would make their way onto the freeway. That did not happen. They went back north towards City Hall again and basically looped back around. Once that happened, there was a large crowd outside City Hall, but nothing like what we saw at the initial point this morning, 10, 11 o'clock, when this demonstration happened. As they gathered outside City Hall, we began to see little groups break off down Spring Street heading towards the 101 freeway. CHP has been posted there. They do not want to see a repeat of what happened last weekend when demonstrators made their way onto the 101 freeway, shut things down in both directions, and wound up inflicting a lot of damage both to the roadway itself and to several CHP vehicles which were parked on the 101 to deal with the demonstrators who had made their way there. So that was blocked. There was no ingress to get onto the freeway surface as well. In fact, we've seen local law enforcement making sure that the overpasses were cleared of people on foot as well. They didn't want to see the potential of that happening again, damage to the roadway below as well. But now we have seen this is splintered off once again on the, I guess, north side where Tim Caputo is. Things are largely peaceful. He said music was playing, kind of calmed things down. We saw a couple people taken into custody. But on the other side, on the south side where we are looking right now from Air 7, tensions are rising. LAPD said they came under fire from rocks and bricks and bottles once again, and it was at that point that they put in the dispersal order, and we see where this is headed now.
And we're showing you this live picture right now, and just a few minutes ago there was smoke there were flashbangs, so much going on in that area. It does appear as though it's calmed down just a little bit. And we want to show you ABC's Matt Gutman, who was also in downtown LA near the Federal Building. He filed this report for us just a short time ago.
We saw the mounted police come in. There was a police barricade just over the 101. We don't know what the catalyst was. It just started, and it was very, very quick. It's incredible how quickly those mounted police can move back a crowd. You feel the power of those horses, and the officers on top of them wielding, batons that are good 4 or 5 feet long. And it moved protesters back quickly. Some people didn't get the chance to move back. They did get trampled or pushed physically by those horses. And I don't yet know what the catalyst was. Clearly, at some point, the LAPD declared this an unlawful assembly. We did not hear that. I don't think many members of the crowd heard that either. And then they moved in with incredible swiftness. I haven't seen them move this quickly in the 8 days that we've been out here in the streets. Something happened, though. I don't know what that trigger was, but that was the fastest that I've seen them clear a crowd, at least since we started. And we're before curfew. This is not a curfew move. This was an effort to clear the crowd. I would say that we haven't seen anything like this, certainly since the events on Sunday and maybe a little bit on Monday. You can see, I don't know if you can see some of the, I'm going to have Greg sort of zoom into those officers who are kneeling. Either they're reloading or preparing for another move. But you can see all these officers with these launchers on them. The launchers that have the green, there's another sound grenade going off. I don't know if that may have been a firecracker here. Officers appear to be gearing up. Again, what they're doing is cleaning off their gas masks. We've seen flashbangs go off. I think that's another flashbang. Yep, that's the LA Sheriff's Department right up there on that bridge. I don't know. You can see them talking to those flashbangs. Those sound grenades moving people off. That looks like a smoke bomb. And you can see people scurrying away right there. That's the Sheriff's Department moving it across the bridge, trying to clear it. You're probably going to see some of those people right over this this pavilion over here. I assume that in the next couple of minutes, we're going to see the LAPD continue to move here. There's some more flashbangs. But it does appear that they're taking off their helmets and gas masks.
Yeah, you could hear the flashbangs in that video, and now we're seeing some smoke. It looks like it's coming out of a car at this point. it appears as though there's a canister under that vehicle. But again, canisters in the middle of the street as well. We've seen smoke a little bit throughout the last 30 minutes or so, and we've again heard those flashbangs, those sound grenades. We saw some people earlier kind of recovering from some tear gas. So, you know, an ongoing situation happening here in downtown LA after what was a day of very peaceful protests.
Yeah, it's really a shame because this kind of felt like it was going to be a day to counter that narrative that LA is a violent home to a violent demonstration going on, and this again, the tone of this day has shifted completely. We're seeing those canisters be lobbed into the crowd and some members of the crowd throwing them back towards authorities. I can't see what jurisdiction is here, which law enforcement, whether that was sheriffs. I think I see some tan. I think that's sheriffs. Yep, those are the sheriffs on the ground there. And so with the mounted patrol, that mounted patrol is what we saw last weekend when the demonstrators were using furniture from Grand Park, tables and chairs and benches, and kind of barricading themselves in the roadway. It happened close to this area right here. I believe it might have been on Aliso or Temple, and then moved to Spring Street right outside City Hall. And both times the mounted officers moved in, dispersed the crowd pretty quickly. And so we see those deputies on horseback ready to once again do that, or if that's the LAPD patrol, ready to do that if needed. We are seeing minor skirmishes here, confrontations between law enforcement and demonstrators who are not ready to go home after a day of demonstration in downtown Los Angeles. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets. Let's go back to Tim Caputo, where I think something's going on there. Tim.
Yeah, we as we moved over, give me a second. As we moved over to Temple and Spring Street, we walked over the overpass, and just as we got to this intersection, come face this way for a second, we were looking up Main Street from the opposite side of the 101, and that's when we saw those flashbangs going off, and we assumed some of the confrontations and issues with the crowd were coming on this side. But what ended up happening is just we got to this intersection here, you see them in the street. I believe it's the Sheriff's Department, but about a half a dozen tear gas canisters were fired into this intersection. And it's tough to breathe in it, it's tough to talk in it, and certainly it gets in your eyes and burns like hell. It did successfully move the crowd that was at this intersection. Oh, heads up, they're throwing here. As the Sheriff's Department is driving a vehicle down the street. Yeah, give me 1 second, brother. So they were throwing some water bottles at that Sheriff's Department. You see it again, they're throwing some water bottles at that cruiser there. I don't see any kind of pushback. Well, there it is. There's the pushback. A flashbang fired above the crowd into the tree there. There goes another one. As the crowd got closer, they're shooting them up into the air above the crowd to try to get them to push back a little bit. You know, that's what's happening on this side as the crowd was getting closer. It's kind of interesting because I know they want to disperse the crowd. And we're talking about City Hall is right next to us here. But at this intersection behind me at Spring and Temple, they fired a half a dozen, 15, I don't even know. I couldn't count how many. The entire intersection was filled with smoke as that tear gas was kind of emanating through the crowd. And I'll tell you what, it not only clears your sinuses, but it cleared the crowd all the way up the street. Here's the thing, they haven't gone, they just left this intersection. So at the moment, we still have a back and forth down the street here, and that one was obviously initiated by the water bottles being thrown at that Sheriff's Department SUV that was coming down the street. 3 or 4 flashbangs pushed the crowd back just a tiny bit. Obviously, they didn't leave that exact area, but this area here, you gotta kind of keep your head on a swivel as they were firing tear gas over here to try to essentially, try to push this crowd back a little bit. Well, let's walk up a little bit, guys. I just want to show you, because they're kind of like smoke bombs, if you will, if you ever played with them as a kid, but obviously infinitely crummier because it gets in your eyes. You see them on the ground here. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all in the ground here at this intersection, and they were fired in here. I'm not going to grab this one because I don't want any residual on me, but this is essentially what was fired here, and then they shoot that gas out in the immediate vicinity. And I can tell you, we were just on the other side, and and it goes everywhere, gets in your eyes, in your nose. Obviously a successful tactic when it comes to trying to push back the crowd, whether or not they push them back far enough to be gone from the area. That's clearly not happening as we're looking down Temple Street towards Main Street, as you see those huge tactical vehicles and law enforcement on that side with the crowd still filling the street from above, going back and forth. I'll send it back to you guys in the studio. We're going to walk down a little bit closer to that.
Yeah, okay. Well, just as always, Tim, stay safe. We appreciate you putting your body on the line, you and Will, your photographer. Any reporter who's worked in this business long enough will experience some tear gas at times to time, and it is not comfortable, and we appreciate Tim doing that. That is on Spring and Temple on the far side of City Hall. On the other side is where Alex Stone from ABC has been reporting now for some time. Let's go to him now and see what the latest is on the flip side of City Hall going on right now. Alex.
Hey, Jory, so what we're seeing is in front of the other side of City Hall, these protesters keep moving up, and you can see this crowd that's here right now where they get moved back by the smoke and by less lethal munitions coming from mainly the Sheriff's Department, but from the LAPD as well. They get moved back, and then they move right back up again, and it's very predictable as they move back up. Then the Sheriff's Department fires off the smoke again, and they all move back, and then they move up again. So we're in kind of this chunk between City Hall and down to Temple where the crowds try to move in. They get pushed back by the Sheriff's Department. You may see it here in a moment again. There are protesters who are beginning to move in again. And then the Sheriff's Department fires off. Here we go. Here comes another one right now. You're going to see the smoke is now coming up into the crowd on the other side of this flag to our left. And now the crowd is beginning to run back again as the Sheriff's Department is firing off the gas there. So guys, this just continues on. This crowd on my side here is now moving up. They're going to get hit by gas in a moment, and then they will get moved back as well. This is going to be a long night here. It is kind of this repeated back and forth. At what point do they, okay, they're moving into our area now. At what point do they move this whole crowd down the street toward LAPD headquarters to get them out of here is not clear, but you can see they are now moving out our area. We're going to move back a little bit as this gas, it burns when it hits, as you were talking about just a moment ago, but they're trying to get this crowd. Some members are kicking the gas canisters back. The LAPD is firing off pepper balls right now on this side that are landing right at our feet. Those will burst open with pepper spray. Guys, we're going to go back to you. We're moving out of this area right now.
Okay. You too, Alex, stay safe. And as we can hear those protesters shouting, they're saying peaceful protest, and in their minds, this might be a peaceful protest, but what's happening is in other parts of downtown, it is not remaining peaceful. So all of law enforcement gives a dispersal order, and it doesn't matter whether the location where you are at that moment is peaceful or not. You have to get out of there. And so law enforcement, it's a moot point at that point, whether your particular group is remaining peaceful or not. They're not being peaceful other places, and so law enforcement needs to make sure that they're safe and clear everybody out.
And LAPD has already confirmed that they've had officers have rocks, bottles, and bricks thrown at them. So we know that this has taken a turn after a day of what we've seen of peaceful protesting. And you're looking at a live picture from Air 7 right now. We want to toss it to Marcel Melanson, who is in Air 7, capturing it all live for us right now. Marcel, what can you see from your vantage point?
Hey, Jory and Sophie, we've had the best vantage point all day. I've been here since 9, and like we've all talked about, there was probably 100,000 people here, and it was a peaceful protest all morning. And then something changed around 4 o'clock, where the posture of the sheriffs and the LAPD just kind of moved to, let's get these people out of here. And that's when we started seeing the flashbangs, the smoke grenades happening. And so you're seeing a number of intersections around here where this standoff is occurring. This one right here on the backside of City Hall, you have LA Sheriff's deputies that have been in a constant confrontation with the protesters where they're launching smoke grenades and actually flashbangs into the crowd, and it's kind of a push and pull, give and take. They push them back, and then they run back. And you're seeing a lot of, I've actually seen some of these protesters with devices where they actually quell the smoke grenades into like a sack with water in it. It's been pretty interesting to see that some of them are well prepared to combat the police force that's here.
Yeah, we see more explosions going off. We see demonstrators grabbing those smoke grenades and throwing them back from where they came. This is the backside of City Hall, as you said, Marcel. This is where Alex Stone had been reporting. Are you? This seems to be one of the hot spots of the confrontation today. Are you able to see from your vantage point, is anything else playing out that we should be paying attention to right now?
From up here, and I'll give you a quick peek, this is the front side of City Hall, where you see a number of protesters that are still here. They haven't moved. They're kind of in a standoff with the sheriffs that are holding at the front of that building. We've seen the front of the federal building where the National Guard is in place. I have not seen them encounter any protesters or get any type of confrontations. They've just been holding that line. Where we've been, the hot point for most of the week was the Federal Detention Center back here. I'll give you a quick look there. That's where the Marines have been set up. We've seen that LAPD, this is one of the initial places that they cleared Alameda Street, and you'll see a long line of LAPD motorcycles that they're using to block the street there. So they're actually taking Alameda to take it out of play and make sure that there's no protesters there. And then we'll come and go back to the 101 freeway, where a big problem on the 101 was the worry that protesters would enter the 101 and disrupt traffic. And you'll see a large contingency of CHP that has prevented that from happening. And also Sheriff's Mounted Patrol was here earlier, just pushing everybody off or anywhere near the 101 freeway to prevent that from being closed. And you can see that just remains open. There's been no problems with traffic there. And the one little hot spot that I would say, or the one little diversionary spot, is back where we were just looking at on the front side of City Hall. That's where we see protesters basically in a conflict with the law enforcement right now. Other than that, everywhere else is pretty peaceful.
Left of your screen is Tim Caputo's live shot, which is basically the same spot that you are looking at. I'm not sure if Tim is ready to talk, but we'll just continue to keep an eye. We'll continue to keep an eye on this. There is Tim. Can you update us on what you're seeing from that vantage point? Looks like you're still dealing with some of the effects of the smoke, gas.
Yeah, I mean, not as bad as before, certainly, but what's happening, you could see kind of there's a flashbang there, but they've shot some of the tear gas onto the side, and what's happening here where we're standing on Main, it's kind of coming up the street and working its way into everyone's eyes and everyone's mouths from here. And look at it. I mean, that's what you're seeing right there when it comes to the smoke that close to the crowd. Off to the left is the vast majority of the sheriff's deputies that are kind of having this conflict with these people. Clearly, there has been this back and forth where they're not only trying to push the crowd back, but there are obviously agitators in the crowd, because we'll occasionally see whether it's a water bottle or some kind of projectile going towards those sheriff's deputies. What you do see, and you can tell the difference as you're watching it this close, is in the air you'll see those flashbangs. They go off 10, 30, 40 feet above the crowd. Obviously the tear gas lands on the crowd and then the smoke comes up. But check this out. As they're pushing back the crowd in this direction, look what's coming down the street on Temple. Now, we were up at Spring Street, and that's where we got that tear gas a little bit earlier. The crowd had dispersed up there when they initially fired the tear gas, but what's happened is, as the Sheriff's Department has moved back this crowd in this direction, everyone else is coming up this side. It's going to be an interesting standoff from this perspective, because on this side of Temple Street, obviously you have the tactical officers, deputies rather, blocking this intersection, and you even see mounted behind them. Will, if you want to point kind of back there to show the horses. They haven't been engaged at this point. What you're seeing off to the side there is underneath the building. Here comes a flashbang. Oh, sorry, that's a tear gas into the crowd. Very close to folks. It burns your eyes, and you're obviously seeing them trying to push the crowd back. But because the sheriff's deputy are on this side of Main, both here on Temple and against the building, what's happening is the crowd has been able to filter in down Temple Street and on this sidewalk on this side of the street. So what was a fairly quiet, here comes another one, a fairly quiet half of the street has now been completely packed with people. Why don't we move from here as tear gas is coming our direction once again. This one again. So here you go. Just as I was describing it, right? As the crowd was coming down Temple Street, the sheriff's deputies realized they had to push this crowd back as well. So in order to do that so it wasn't packed from this direction, here comes a couple flashbangs in our direction. They're putting some of the tear gas in this direction and flashbangs in this direction to get people back up Temple Street. Take a couple steps this way for me. So we're going to get to the corner here as these flashbangs are getting dangerously close to us. So we have both the good vantage point and a safe distance from everything else. We'll come out of the street over here for a second. We're going to stand behind some of these cars on the other side just so we see everything that's going on. But what's happened is, as they tried to push this crowd back, you see now they're gathering up here on Temple Street. So you have easily a couple thousand people almost waiting in the wings, and sheriff's deputies trying to hold them off from both sides from entering the street with flashbangs and gas canisters, both on this side and the far side of Main Street. Obviously, this is the brunt of the action. Where we were over on the other side was quiet, and there were a lot of people there. This is the exact opposite. It's been popping off at least for the last 20, 30 minutes or so. Oh, shoot. No, they just dropped some stuff and they're moving back. So we'll send it back to you guys. We get our bearings here.
Okay, Tim, stay safe. Thank you for that reporting on the ground there. We want to give you an update too. LAPD recommending people stay away from the Civic Center area. They are reporting that fireworks are being thrown at officers. Again, that is from LAPD. A reminder that a dispersal order was issued just before 4 p.m. for persons on Alameda, south of Aliso and north of Temple Street. So that dispersal order, again, given just about 2 hours ago now, with fireworks being thrown at officers.
Right, and that order was given after demonstrators were throwing bricks and rocks and bottles at those officers. There's a very short leash today on what demonstrators could get away with, and it had been going great until, as we said, just before 4 o'clock, and that happened, and we see a much different situation here, a disappointing scene playing out on this Saturday of what had been peaceful protests, clearly not peaceful any longer. We have the governor of California who earlier today was pleading with Los Angeles, with the demonstrators, saying you don't have to match the chaos, choose calm, choose peace. And of course, it's not just Los Angeles, of course. There were dozens, literal dozens of demonstrations statewide. There were more than 3 dozen here in Southern California, and you look at what's happening in the Central Valley, Northern California as well. So he was talking to the state, but here we are at 5:30 on this Saturday, and this has now devolved once again into a confrontation with the sheriff's department and police, demonstrators turning violent, and the law enforcement looking to clear the area. And we see the effects of what happened here. We want to bring in our law enforcement expert, Bruce Thomas, who helped us out last weekend amid the violence that was playing out. And Bruce, here we go again. What have you noticed?
Well, you had a very orderly, very peaceful protest with possibly upwards of 100,000 people. And as that protest wound down, you have some bad actors, some anarchists that have come in with backpacks filled with concrete, bottles filled with urine, just fireworks, other things to throw at the police and agitate them. And so what we've had now was a dispersal order given, basically saying, okay, we're done playing. Everybody needs to go home now. It's become so unsafe.
Bruce, you know, we know that these protests were pre-planned. So we expected so many people to head to downtown LA. Of course, we were hoping that it would remain peaceful throughout the day. That is what we saw for a majority of the day. But law enforcement appeared to be ready in case something took a turn. In terms of what you've seen, the number of law enforcement on the ground, do you think that they were prepared and are prepared in case this continues to take that turn that we've seen now?
Oh, I think they're definitely prepared. For the sheriff's department, you've had mobile field forces. For LAPD, the same. You've had the motorcycle officers. And, of course, both departments have deployed their mounted units. So they're definitely prepared for this. But you've got a huge crowd, which is very unruly, throwing stuff at the police and possibly injuring some. So at this point, they're not playing nice anymore. Throwing flashbangs, stun ball grenades, that type of thing to get people to move out.
And we saw last weekend, Bruce, thousands of those pepper balls and flashbangs and just law enforcement doing whatever they can to the point where they were beginning to run out of supplies on the streets of Los Angeles. We have seen some direct confrontations. Given that there was a curfew looming just about 2.5 hours from now, what do you see as how this is going to play out tonight? At what point do the sheriff's department and the LAPD move in full force to clear the entire area? Are they going to wait until the curfew is in order to clear these crowds? Or if things continue to play like this, are they going to move in a way that we didn't even see last weekend?
Yeah, Jory, that's a great question. You know, you've got curfew occurring in about 2.5 hours or so. They're not going to wait till curfew or basically shutting down the downtown area. To move that type of crowd with that many people, you've got to start now. So I fully suspect you're going to see both LAPD and the sheriffs and any other mutual agencies that have responded to be a little more proactive, pushing these people out of that area.
Bruce, thank you so much for your time. We're going to get back to you, but we want to go straight to Matt Gutman, who is live on the ground outside of City Hall. Matt, what are you seeing?
Hey, Sophie, I'll give you a lay of the land right now. So City Hall, just to my right, and you can see LAPD protecting it. They've got that lineup, officers there, also on the other side. And this is that park just to the north of the federal building. And right now you can see that the sheriffs are pretty relaxed, but there was this very significant skirmish here for the past, I don't know, 45 minutes. Folks like this young man engaged in whatever it was with law enforcement, somebody trying to come out now. This appears to be one of those smoke grenades that was used by law enforcement. It puts out this green smoke. And the amount of ordnance that they use, the amount of less lethal, is littered on the street here. You can see sort of all of this detritus and debris from it. All these marks on the ground, that's those smoke bombs or those smoke bombs going off. You used a tremendous amount of less lethal. There are pieces of rubber on the street as well. The protesters have sort of moved away right now. We've been watching, I'm actually going to take the mask off. We've been watching the LAPD and the sheriffs sort of move people off, but it seems like there have been these skirmishes just for skirmishes' sake. I don't know if there's any direction in this crowd at this point. I don't know if there's any leadership or organization. Right now it seems extraordinarily chaotic, a very far cry from what we saw earlier today, where the crowds were moving in unison, chanting with the placards and a message. It seems that it's different right now. And you've seen all these different kinds of sort of personal defenses that people have built. They use boogie boards, and they have got helmets and respirators to try to clash with law enforcement here. And right now it definitely does seem to be a lull, but you can see this skirmish line from the sheriff's department right here. They are in full riot gear with respirators and gas masks on right now. It gives you a sense of the intensity. And I think in the distance, you can hear more skirmishes. I'm not sure where that is. And right behind us, another line of LAPD. There are probably at least 1,000 officers in the streets right now. That's what Chief McDonald told me earlier this week, in the sense of how many forces they're deploying. And right now, it definitely seems like a lull. But we were on, I guess it was Temple earlier when this started, and we did not see protesters throw projectiles at police. It seemed like the LAPD initiated moving the crowd back with those mounted police, and that's when we saw some protesters begin to throw projectiles, bottles, using sticks against those mounted officers, and that's when it got really ugly. And it's been like that for the past, I guess, 90 minutes or so, Sophie.
Yeah, Matt, we've been working to see where that began as well, because we saw the law enforcement move in, the dispersal order given, but we hadn't seen anything. The LAPD says they came under attack. Yeah, go ahead. You didn't see that either.
Jory, we were standing right there at the skirmish line with the protesters. Taunting, yes. Shouting, yes. But we saw no physical interaction between protesters and the LAPD on that skirmish line just off the 101. Nor did we see any physical interaction between protesters and federal forces, the Department of Homeland Security, law enforcement agents, California National Guard, or the Marines at the federal building, which is just over my right shoulder. So at no point did we see today's protest personally get violent before police move in, nor did we hear a dispersal order. We did not hear them say at any point on a bullhorn or otherwise that this was an unlawful assembly and people should vacate. It may have been said elsewhere. We personally, my team at ABC, did not hear that. So that was nebulous today, and I think it was different than in previous days when law enforcement, specifically the LAPD, was very declarative, very assertive about unlawful assembly, ordering people out, giving them a warning, giving them 5 extra minutes, and then moving in. You know, in the past days, it's been very clear what the parameters were. It was very clear when they were going to move in. Today, it came very much as a surprise, Jory.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Matt Gutman, thank you. You said they're in a lull. We like the lulls. Let's hope it continues into the night. And again, questions to be answered, where this began, where it was that those LAPD officers came under fire from those bricks and rocks and the bottles that they say started this dispersal order.
But we did see some law enforcement on the move from Tim Caputo's camera. We also saw some of those mounted officers Tim, what are you seeing from your vantage point right now?
Well, you guys talked about things getting accelerated fairly quickly. This is a situation where we saw LAPD move up the street, and you can see the line of LAPD officers here, and check it out, mounted not far behind them. They moved up to the intersection of Temple and Main itself. Main was where we saw those flashbangs, where we saw that tear gas a short time ago as the crowd was starting to make its way down Temple Street. Look at the stark contrast of it right now. You see up at the top of the street there at Spring Street, it is full of LAPD officers as well. This is kind of the tactic that they were using when it came to showing an showing an abundance of officers out here. They came out here in numbers as officers with LAPD were flanked alongside the Sheriff's Department as well. The Sheriff's Department were the ones that would go back and forth with this crowd with the flashbangs and tear gas, and just in the last 15 minutes or so, that's when LAPD moved up the street from Aliso to Temple Street, and they have been able to move this crowd back at least from this intersection. We saw them completely packed from here all the way up to the top of the street. We got tear gas at both intersections. Right now, it is full of LAPD and Sheriff's Department. Whether or not they are going to move farther up the street and continue to disperse this crowd remains to be seen, but they assembled very quickly here. There were a handful of officers that were just about halfway up the block near Aliso Street, and then all of a sudden, they came up shoulder to shoulder up the street, and you hear them giving the dispersal order as they moved up the street, and boy, did that crowd disperse. They moved out of here and up the street. They didn't even have to use tear gas or any kind of flashbangs. It's just all of these officers in their tactical gear. You may see a couple flags, a couple lingering people in the area, maybe 20, 30, 40 people at this point. It was thousands 30, 35 minutes ago. So obviously this tactic of all of these officers coming out here to try to clear the streets has worked. It doesn't mean the crowd is gone. Obviously they are moving farther back, but I can tell you just from listening, I haven't heard a flashbang in the last 10, 15 minutes. I haven't heard any of those tear gas canisters go off. So it seems to be working. Obviously, we have several more hours until we hit curfew, and there are a lot of people out on the street. Just exactly how CHP, the Sheriff's Department, and LAPD kind of tackles that issue when it comes to arresting and detaining those people who are out after curfew remains to be seen. There have been several hundred people over the last several nights who are out 8:15, 8:30 that were easily taken into custody. Not as easy when you have 5,000, 10,000 people lingering in the streets. Hopefully, this is a sign of things to come as police officers show the power of numbers by coming out here and getting the crowd to move on.
Right hand of your screen there, officers moving protesters. And Tim, is it clear to you where these officers are trying to move these protesters, or is the message just go home? It's time to go home today as that curfew approaches.
So I'm thinking back to Sunday night when we were out here, right? I mean, obviously the big thing that they pay attention to, especially CHP, is to ensure people don't get onto the 101. We saw that way earlier this afternoon when they moved that line of CHP to the other side of the 101. On this side, obviously, there's a whole big city on the opposite side of where we're standing. And typically what we've seen over the last week, essentially every night, is as they fill, police officers and sheriff's deputies fill every intersection with officers, with the mounted patrol, with the tactical vehicles, the crowd gets smaller and smaller. They disperse and they kind of move around. So it's not one centralized group, which makes it a little bit easier. And here we go, right on cue. They are moving up Main Street as we speak. You see LAPD working its way up the street. Will, come off that bench for a second. Take an easy step there. I just want to show you as they're going, because if you look past these officers, don't go too far on the street, horses right there. So if you look beyond the officers down the street, you could start to see the semblance of some of the flags another block up. And you asked, perfect question and perfect timing for that, as they're moving up the street, they are systematically moving them from City Hall and out farther into the city. The hope there to a large degree, obviously, is as the crowd moves back, some people tail off, some people decide it's time to go home, some people just get out of Dodge, and they have a smaller crowd to deal with. So when 8 o'clock and curfew finally rolls around, it is a manageable crowd, and hopefully everyone is gone so they don't have to make mass amounts of arrests for folks breaking curfew.
Yeah, we will see how this plays out. Tim, thank you. We hope that calm prevails here moving into the night. A couple big events happening around Los Angeles. There is a big CONCACAF Gold Cup match happening at, I believe, in Inglewood, and there is a Dodger game tonight. And in fact, let's go back up to Air 7. Marcel Melanson, our Up in Air 7 photographer up there, also has to deal with a flight restriction that might be put into place this evening because of the Dodger game. So first, Marcel, what are you seeing from your vantage point as we see officers now moving in once again?
Well, this was the site of that last conflict where the smoke bombs were going off and the flashbangs. What they've done is LAPD and both sheriffs basically reinforced their lines. We saw a number of officers show up to help those officers that were holding the intersection, including this mounted patrol. Now they've come in and they're just pushing this crowd back beyond City Hall. They're going southbound right now. And this was where before there were basically a number of protesters that were in conflict and they were agitating the police or coming in conflict with the police. And now with the people that they've got to support them, they had some more police come, they're able to push them back, and they're not really getting any type of resistance from there. What I will show you is City Hall, in front of City Hall, still has a number of people there. Now, we're listening to the police on the radio. They're also trying to do the same maneuver in front of City Hall. They're coming in from the north to the south, and we're starting to see some of this crowd disperse to the south as well. So basically, you think about strategy and tactics. They're coming in, they're going to move people away to the south and hope they disperse and kettle them to the point where they're giving them a way out, but they're going to stop these conflicts in these areas. And you're right, Jory, 6:10 is when the Dodgers game starts. That's when a temporary flight restriction happens, and that's when the news helicopters and all the helicopters over LA will have to push out for that game.
Marcel, I'm wondering if we can just, thank you for that report, if we can dip into Matt Gutman's camera. He is live on the ground, and as officers on horseback move in, we just saw a couple people, I think, get knocked over by the horses as they are moving in to try and clear this crowd out. It sounds as if someone has been affected by some tear gas in the area, but these officers continue to move in. This is what our reporters on the ground have been seeing all afternoon now from different locations around the City Hall area. Tim Caputo initially was on the other side of the 101 freeway where officers from CHP had actually moved in to keep people off the overpass and from affecting the 101 freeway. This is now on the south side of the 101 freeway in downtown around City Hall. Officers moving in. We've seen tear gas and now on horseback clear these crowds.
And all throughout the day, we've shown you no King's Day protests. Of course, a massive one in downtown LA, but we've seen them in Santa Monica. And we want to go to Riverside now, where that's where we find our Eyewitness News reporter, Rob McMillan, who is live on the ground at a protest again in Riverside. Rob, you know, a lot going on in downtown LA, but what are you seeing over there in Riverside?
Well, this protest here just starting to take off, unlike the situation in downtown Los Angeles where that massive No King's Day protest started around 9:30, 10 o'clock this morning. This protest just starting around 5:30 tonight. And at first, they were all gathered around one of the main intersections here in Riverside. And what they would do is just standing on the sidewalks, wait till the crossing lights would go. It was one of those intersections where it's a diagonal crosswalk, and that's when they would move into the street and, you know, waving their signs, not blocking any traffic. But now, as you can see, they have moved into the street. They're walking down one of these small streets here in downtown Riverside, right in front of Riverside City Hall. I just checked with the Riverside Police Department, and they say at this point there are no signs of any violence, but a very, very large crowd. For those who have not been following this situation locally here in Riverside, there was a protest yesterday that they were actually a little bit more concerned about because it was just so organic. That was an anti-ICE protest. Only about 200 people showed up, although there was a counter-protester who showed up at that one and said something to agitate the crowd and then actually led police on a small pursuit, and they found a weapon in his vehicle. He was arrested, and it's unclear whether or what the intentions were with that weapon. But this protest, obviously much larger, hundreds if not thousands of people here marching now in downtown Riverside. Again, the police department saying at this point there's no sign of violence. Obviously they moved into the street, and so they're blocking traffic.
But right now, they are continuing to monitor the situation through the city camera system. I understand they have drones overhead. We have talked to several of the people here. The 3 people who I talked with so far, 2 from Riverside, 1 from Jurupa Valley nearby, very concerned about some of the ICE raids that we've all witnessed in Southern California over the past week or so. Also, this being the theme of No Kings, we see the sign here. A lot of them very upset by their perception that this administration has authoritarian tendencies. Again, that's their perception, but one they feel very strongly about. Live in Riverside, Rob McMillan, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Okay, our Inland Empire Bureau Chief Rob McMillan on the ground there in Riverside where things remain peaceful. Let's hope it remains that way there, because it is not the case in Los Angeles, in downtown, where things, once again, tensions are rising, confrontations are happening, and we go back to Tim Caputo live on the ground. We can see on the right side, that is his picture right now. Tim.
Guys, it is like a firing squad here. If you look, actually those blue, Will, to the left here, you can see they keep reloading those non-lethal rounds right here in front of you. There's a dozen in her hands right there, and you could hear them firing into that crowd right in front of City Hall, right here on Spring Street. Check it out over here. I just want to show you from this angle here, because it is a barrage, one after another, of these LAPD officers firing these non-lethal kind of blue. They're like foam. They don't shoot rubber bullets anymore, but essentially foam non-lethal bullets into the crowd here. We actually spoke with a young man a short time ago who was hitting the collarbone by one of those. Listen, they don't necessarily break the skin, but we did see last week we were in Compton, a guy who got hit like 3 or 4 times, had huge welts and was bleeding at least from one of them. And what you're seeing now, check out to the right here too. Look at this show of force. There are so many LAPD officers at this intersection here. We showed you a little bit earlier what was happening up the street as they moved the crowd back, and what you're seeing right here is this line of officers trying to get this crowd that is packed in front of the steps of City Hall at least to move back or move out of the area. There is, come back this way too, this is unbelievable. There are 25, 30 different LAPD officers standing in that line right here, and what they're doing is you see the box there, they keep reloading essentially with those non-lethal they're not beanbags, rather, they are foam bullets, and firing into the crowd. There is a line of these officers right here on Spring Street at the top of Temple, and to the left, there are a lot of people just still standing there, and I can tell you, just based on the people that we've spoken to who have been hit by those non-lethal, they pack a punch. They're obviously going to leave a big bruise and a big mark, and they are firing them right into the crowd to try to get them to move back. Obviously different tactics we've seen from the Sheriff's Department down the street over on Main, who for a while were shooting the tear gas and shooting those flashbangs above the crowd to try to get them to move back. And here comes LAPD coming up this street here. We're kind of in the bushes at the moment, so we should be okay. As they're firing down, sorry guys, I'm just going to get my bearings real quick. As LAPD is moving the line a little bit, yep, we'll take a step back. Taking heat from these officers as well to make sure we're in a safe spot as they continue to move. Check to my right here. And we'll come to the right here real quick as they're moving down the street. Watch your step, guys, you're walking backwards. As they're moving, move. Obviously a handful of protesters being asked to move, and in other cases being forced to move out of the area. This is a confrontation here with one individual who has been hanging out on Temple Street and kind of mocking and yelling at both deputies and LAPD officers for quite some time. They got him out of the way, but as we're standing, it sounds like there are some sort of motorcycles and mopeds kind of burning out in the street in front of City Hall. This is what we're dealing with, as we have this line of LAPD officers continuing to fire those non-lethal rounds right into the crowd. But I can tell you guys, from my vantage point, it doesn't seem like it's necessarily moving the crowd farther back as they continue to fire into the crowd. It's whether or not they're able to actually get them to move farther up the street or up into the park and up the hill remains to be seen. But if you're wondering if LAPD brought enough officers out here to deal with this crowd, I could tell you just from this intersection alone and the number of these non-lethal rounds we've seen and heard fired into the crowd, it seems like they came prepared.
Thank you, and stay safe. Thanks for that reporting on the ground. We want to stay with your picture, but we want to bring in law enforcement expert Bruce Thomas. Bruce, some of these images that we have seen include a lot of law enforcement and multiple rounds of non-lethal rubber bullets, foam bullets, as Tim was saying. What do you make of the situation that you see right now? Because it does appear as though it has escalated since we last spoke with you.
Yeah, you're 100% correct. It definitely has escalated into a huge confrontation. LAPD and sheriffs with their skirmish lines are trying to move the crowd. They're not moving. So they're using their less lethal weaponry to move the crowd. And eventually they'll bring in the horses to move them and possibly bring in the motor units that I know are staged further down by the federal building. But yeah, it's definitely at a tipping point.
For so many people to show up for this peaceful protest today. Again, as we've mentioned, this has taken a turn. But we also know that there are National Guard troops. There are Marines in the ground in our city as well. Just for our viewers, just because there is a distinction here, can you talk to us a little bit about what those federal agents' job is and what our local law enforcement's job is today?
Yeah, what you're seeing is, and what everybody recognizes, is LAPD. They're in the black, the dark navy blue uniforms, if you were. They're being supported under mutual aid by the LA County Sheriff's Department, which has brought in some of their mobile field forces. The National Guard and the Federal Protective Police are tasked with protecting the federal properties, i.e. the Metropolitan Detention Center, the federal building downtown, and the federal building in Westwood on Wilshire Boulevard. Then you have the Marines, which are backing up the National Guard. Both agencies, National Guard and Marines, typically, and they shouldn't be on the streets of LA patrolling or doing crowd control. They're basically force protection units.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, what we see on the ground right now from Tim Caputo shot, we see those officers in the black. That's LAPD. That's who has now reloaded those non-lethal rounds, and we also saw sheriffs right behind them as well.
Yeah, you see the officers are directing people to leave, to disperse, to get out of the street, and that's when they want to do this now rather than wait to curfew and possibly try to do this under the cover of darkness.
Bruce, you have a long history of working in law enforcement, almost 3 decades with the LA County Sheriff's Department. I do want to ask you a question based on something our viewers might have caught here in a little bit. We saw our Matt Gutman of ABC News, his camera. He was being pushed back by some of the officers, and there's been kind of a fine line that officers and Sheriff's Department officials have walked in terms of dealing with members of the media. This is a precarious situation. There is a lot of media out there, some of them with TV, a lot of print, a lot of still photographers who are right up on the front lines there. How, you know, I'm sure every situation is different, but how tough is it when you're out there and you have kind of unmarked reporters just in plain clothes, T-shirts, not wearing a suit and tie like we sometimes are in this field, dealing with that situation of media in your face and on the streets when you're trying to control a crowd like this?
Yeah, Jory, it's a great question. It's a real tough challenge for law enforcement. Media typically, like you said, they have a manner of dress. In a situation like this, they're more casual. We would like to see some sort of maybe tactical vest, traffic control vest that says press, says media on it. We've seen it in some of the, for lack of a better word, the war zones that we've seen, you know, where reporters are there. Also, we understand they have a job to do. Sometimes they do get in the way of it because they want to get the live shot or the money shot or the report right from the action. And that's where it becomes a problem for law enforcement.
We want to go back to Tim Caputo. Bruce, thank you so much for your time. But on the left side of your screen is you're seeing Tim Caputo's live picture there. He was just told to put on his mask. That is from law enforcement. Tim,
you can see those officers doing that as well behind him.
Yeah.
Oh, we have Tim.
Yeah, real quick, guys, because I just want to give you a sense of what's happening here as you see this huge kind of staging area here at the top of Temple and Spring Street, even with the tactical officers and deputies up on the trucks there. We were just told a short time ago by a nice officer who let us know, go ahead and put your mask on if you have one. It seems as though as they were shooting those non-lethal rounds into the crowd, they are now taking a different tactic by the Sheriff's Department, something we saw down on Main Street itself. The LAPD, which had lined up on the street here shooting those non-lethal rounds into the crowd, have now been replaced by the LA County Sheriff's Department, and we know from what we've seen this afternoon, it is a bit of a different tactic. Take a step back here, hold on. that they are using the tear gas to shoot into the crowd. Not to say that the non-lethal rounds weren't effective, but I could tell you from the 2 times we were hit from it, that gas certainly works, and the tear gas itself likely going to be shot into this crowd in front of these steps of City Hall. Show to the left here a little bit so you get a sense of where we are. Obviously you have law enforcement in front of the steps of City Hall. The crowd itself is on Spring Street. They haven't moved since they were moved up a little bit from where they were on the 101 and down where they were on Main Street. Now the Sheriff's Department lining up, getting their masks on, putting their helmets on, and getting ready what is, to my understanding, is about to shoot some tear gas into the crowd. And boy, I got to tell you, it's going to be tough because there is a lot of people in that crowd, and those people are going to get hit hard with that tear gas. But this, at this point, is an inevitability, as the police departments here, both LAPD and the Sheriff's Department, have tried for the last at least 30 minutes to get this crowd to move off of Spring Street out in front of City Hall. They just have not done that. So now, here in a matter of moments, we're about to have what believes to be tear gas shot into this crowd.
Oh, Tim. Just because we've seen a few different vantage points here today, can you give our viewers a bit of a scene setter again, exactly where you are, how far City Hall is from you?
Yeah, look up, bro, right, okay. City Hall is right next to us. So we're on the north side of City Hall. We're on Temple Street that goes uphill to Spring Street. We actually walked over Spring Street. It was not blocked by CHP, one of the few blocks that wasn't. Main Street, Los Angeles, and Alameda were all blocked by CHP. Much of the crowd actually moved up to Spring Street itself. Some of them were working their way down Temple Street. That's where we saw some of the skirmishes, where they were shooting the flashbangs, and where the mounted sheriff's deputies were. They are now, where'd they go? Up the street a little bit here behind me. But so we're next to City Hall, and this crowd is in front of City Hall on Spring Street. The sheriff's deputies are standing right at the intersection of Temple and Spring Street. And we're going to give it a second here, because it seems like in any second they're going to start firing this tear gas into the crowd. They have, and here we go. This is where it begins and where they really start to move the crowd back. Those are flashbangs, a combination of flashbangs and the tear gas, and look how effective that is. Flashbangs are the ones going off above the crowd. They are loud, they are jarring, and they do get your attention and move you back. That sounds like the pepper balls shot from a paintball gun as well. Hitting those are a little bit more centralized. Oh man, that guy shot from right over my shoulder there. Yeah, he's behind me. But they are shooting into the crowd, both the tear gas and the flashbangs from above, and you see kind of the effectiveness when it gets to pushing that crowd back. Sophie, you had asked a little while ago, well, what's the plan? Where are they sending them? At the moment, not right here. So that's the purpose of this, is like I said, as they start to move the crowd back and disperse the crowd away from where it's the most congregated, the most packed, the hope is a handful of people peel off, a handful of people go home, and the crowd gets smaller and smaller to the point where it's less to deal with for these officers. But I can tell you, between the Sheriff's Department and the LAPD, there is a whole host of law enforcement out here at this intersection firing that tear gas and those flashbangs into the crowd. There's a toss from the crowd. That one went off right there, pushing it back as the Sheriff's Department's moving up. Let's move up with them here, Will. Let's just get to the corner here real quick, just to show you as police are moving up. One thing to keep in mind, Will, that's far enough, is when you get some of these officers as they're moving up, you occasionally get projectiles thrown back at police as the tear gas and as the flashbangs are going up. There's a water bottle being thrown at police. And what you're seeing is the sheriff's deputies are the first ones in the line here, moving the crowd up, specifically with the tear gas, oftentimes with those flashbangs, and a combination of those two, definitely pushing the crowd back from City Hall. They did have barricades up, yeah, and it looks like they have someone in custody right here in front of us, someone who clearly didn't move back. Of course, we can't see or didn't see exactly what this person did. We got you. And we are keeping a decent distance. Here comes that tear gas in our direction. That's not ideal. But what they're doing is, as they push this crowd back to one street up, excuse me, as they push the crowd back,
all right, Tim.
One street up, the gas really gets in there, and it is a very effective way to move the crowd. And certainly, depending on the direction the wind is moving, it is a very effective way to move that crowd. And as they move up the street, we're going to take a step back and catch our breath.
Yeah. Tim, get your breath. This is David Ono. I'm sitting in for Jory Rand right now, along with Sophie. Great reporting, Tim. A war zone it's quickly turning into in downtown Los Angeles. So obviously all the pictures that you see on your screen are live pictures. That was from the ground, from Tim Caputo's camera. They have been overcome with the tear gas. This obviously is Air 7. So let's get to Marcel Melanson, who's been overhead. And Marcel, you've been seeing what's been transpiring. You saw the flash bangs, the tear gas. What effect is it having on the crowd?
David, basically the crowd was not moving until those measures were introduced. We had a large crowd in front of City Hall. That was probably the largest contingency left around downtown as we looked around here. And once the sheriffs moved in and they began to use the tear gas, immediately the crowd reacted so fast. I mean, they moved out of here with a quickness. You still have a couple of agitators that are in there that are throwing tear gas back at the officers, but for the most part, the large crowd that was here just a few moments ago has now scattered throughout Grand Park and more south on Spring Street. So definitely an effective way to get them out of here. You could see as I tilted the camera and pan over here to Grand Park, you see a number of protesters that are making their way out of here where they just were not leaving prior to that.
Right. Clearly, it's having some effect. And Sophie, it's a shame, though, because there have been a number of peaceful protests throughout the day. In fact, Los Angeles, downtown where you're seeing right now, had thousands of people that were peaceful through most of the day. And we have places like Whittier and Pasadena still underway. Riverside just got underway. You said Long Beach and Santa Monica. All of these places were peaceful, but this is how LA is going to be identified from today, and has continued to be identified this way, and that is the violence within the few square blocks that this is taking place.
Yeah, that's right. And those protests started at around 10 a.m. this morning, and hundreds of thousands of people we know showed up in downtown LA. And now, if you take a look at your right-hand side, LA County Sheriff's Department moving in towards. Sorry, apologies. I don't know exactly which street that is, but they are moving closer to where those protesters were. Marcel, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing that the protesters are now moving out. We've talked about early on about strategy and tactics and what the Sheriff's Department can do versus the less lethal rounds of LAPD. I think it was a tactical decision to move the sheriffs in here because they can use tear gas, and it was probably more effective in this case to get those protesters out from in front of City Hall. That was their main focus. So you could see this contingency of sheriffs, their SRT or Special Response Team has moved in front of City Hall. They replaced all the LAPD units, and now where we had a large crowd, I would say probably a couple thousand people, are all on the move. They have pretty much dispersed the area. They've moved to the south and to the west to Grand Park, and now they're basically what we had before with that large crowd in front of City Hall has now gone.
But Marcel, it's taken a long time. That dispersal order came in just before 4 p.m. today. It's now just after 6. And part of the reason why that dispersal order came in is because LAPD reported that bottles, bricks were being thrown at law enforcement officers as well as fireworks.
Yeah, I mean, we were here. I was here at 4 o'clock when the dispersal order started, and I actually saw the first interactions between the protesters and LAPD, and it was the way that the mood changed and the basically the posturing of the whole situation almost changed in an instant. It went from no incidents reported all day, hundreds of thousands of people, to now very quickly. And I want to say that I think that first initial incident happened down on Alameda, down in front of the Federal Detention Center, is where it first triggered, and then it just trickled off into the rest of the area here. And very quickly, I think the dispersal order, one of the tactics is, hey, give them a chance to go on their own. We don't want to have this immediate clash, and that's one of the tactics that they've used. Show of force, get a lot of officers here, let them see them in the place, and then we'll try to get these people to come out peacefully. I think the last thing anybody wants is a confrontation, so they're using whatever tactics they can to forcibly move them out without actually having contact.
Right. So perhaps you're right, that incident may have occurred near the federal detention center, which explains why so few people actually heard the dispersal order go out. Even Matt Gutman was explaining that he didn't hear anything, but suddenly there was this police action. That might be because it wasn't anywhere near where the masses were this afternoon. Nevertheless, we are approaching 6:08 right now in the evening. The curfew kicks in at 8 o'clock, although now this dispersal order changes the rules just a bit. They want everybody out of this area, and the vast majority of people seem to be cooperating now, especially with the tear gas, the flashbangs, etc. But there's always that small group of people that actually look forward to this opportunity to create unrest and do what they do. And we've been watching after the last 8 days, Sophie.
Yeah, you mentioned those flashbangs, the tear gas, and those mounted officers. Those horses are strong. We saw some protesters come in contact with some of those horses as well. But we want to get back to the ground with ABC's Alex Stone. Alex, what's going on where you are right now?
Hey, Sophie and David. Yeah, things have definitely calmed down here now compared to when I was talking to you just a little while ago, and we were more in front of City Hall and the smoke was going off and the less lethal munitions were being used. We're in front of the LAPD right now at Main and First. You can see they have a skirmish line right here. The Metro unit, their SWAT team, just moved everybody down. And at least on the other side of City Hall, there's something going on. But generally here, it has calmed way down, and police are beginning to take a lesser stance based on what they were able to do and move everybody down. It did clear a lot of people out. I want to show you when we were live on the air and all of those booms and bangs were going off, and they are on the other side of City Hall and then down the street a little bit. But this is half of what we are told is called a bang ball, is what one officer called it, where it goes up in the air and then bursts open and has gas and things in it. This is part of a 40 millimeter flashbang, the big booms that were going off. These are all over the ground down here right now, and these are what we're going boom, and then either putting out gas or putting out a loud noise and getting those protesters to move. But I was talking to one detective, guys, and they say that this is going to be a very long night. They know they're going to be battling and playing kind of a cat and mouse game of the protesters running up and they push them back, running up and push them back. But it is a much lesser stance, at least in this area around City Hall and LAPD headquarters, than it was just a little while ago. So they're continuing to move people around, but it does seem they're making progress.
Yeah.
David, Sophie?
It may explain the very firm movement by PD and sheriffs to get this crowd out of the way, because they anticipate this could be a tough fight today. There's been a lot of attention on this Saturday. It's happening right now. We're right in the midst of it. And perhaps if they get ahead of the game at 6 o'clock in the evening before the sun actually goes down, they could have the upper hand sooner than later.
David, that's exactly right. They really held off most of the day. There was a lot of screaming at police. There was a lot of screaming at the National Guard and the Marines, who are now in front of the federal building where it had just been National Guard. Now the Marines are there as well, and the federal agents, federal police who are helping them out. They had been taking it all day. And then eventually, right around 4 o'clock, almost on the dot, it seemed that there may have been a plan to begin getting ready for curfew tonight and begin getting the streets cleared out. They say they were also taking rocks and bottles and chunks of concrete and brick, and that's when the decision was made to move everybody out, and they began marching them down. And we saw it in front of the federal building, and then they went up Temple and then came down Main Street here, and now we're clearing both sides of that. And yeah, instead of waiting until 8 o'clock when then you've got the curfew and arrests being made and moving everybody around, to get going early on it, and they definitely did. And it does seem that they've made quite a bit of progress in the efforts they've been making. It was a very different scene here an hour ago. It was very active. Police were in a very stern stance to us and to the protesters, and now they're able to take a deep breath. And then they're still doing some clearing, but generally around LAPD headquarters, they're kind of making this their stopping point, where they've got it on all the streets around. They've got them blocked off. They've got the skirmish line set up, and then everybody is kind of dispersed around it. So their efforts do seem to be working. They've moved them around. They've moved them down the street, and they were able to get they call them agitators, but those that, they just kept coming up. They wanted to fight against the cops, and the second they would throw off gas, then they would get moved back. They would come right back in, and they would get burned by the gas. It wasn't necessarily tear gas, more like a pepper spray gas. Then they would move them back, and you can see there are more officers. We hear more munitions going off in the distance, but more officers coming out now. So they're going to have quite a fight on their hands tonight, but they are making progress right now, guys.
You just mentioned that it had calmed down where you were, but again, now we are starting to hear that pick up again. We want to go to Tim Caputo, who is also live in downtown LA. Tim, what's happening where you are at this moment?
Yeah, we're on the steps of City Hall, like physically standing on the steps on the front end of City Hall. The deputies let us move up a little bit to get behind them to kind of get a better vantage point of their operation as they're pushing this crowd down towards First Street. We saw them essentially right in the middle of City Hall, underneath Grant Park, and the crowd here in the street. Just maybe 5 minutes ago, they started to throw some of those flashbangs, some of those, I didn't see tear gas this time around, but you see how much smaller the crowd, at least in the street, is at this point. What we're seeing is now the Sheriff's Department taking the lead. Earlier, LAPD had moved in with all of those officers firing those non-lethal rounds into the crowd. They have been kind of taken over initially with that big, overwhelming amount of tear gas into the crowd a little while ago, the ones that hit us too. And now the crowd has dispersed an awful lot, and they've moved them nearly to First Street. It's just a long stretch of road here, so they're not quite there yet. Here's the thing with this this intersection that's a little bit tough. Not quite an intersection, but essentially where it intersects with Grant Park. Will, if you come look this direction here, I know the sun is behind me, so it'll be a little tough to see. The park here that goes up to Hill Street is actually packed with people. We don't know if these, when we were here earlier, like I say 3 hours ago, these were families, these were people buying popcorn, buying hot dogs in the crowd, in the crowd. We don't know if that same kind of joyful group is here. Certainly the ones in the streets that are ones battling with the sheriff's deputies and police officers the last couple hours now, they seem to be authorities focusing their attention on the handful of folks in the street. It seems like maybe 100 or maybe 200, and that's where they're focusing their attention. They are not moving all that quickly, but they are certainly moving what seems like eventually to First Street. And actually, if you see down the street from where I'm standing, it looks as though there's LAPD all the way on First Street, on Spring Street, blocking them. So they would have to go either direction on First Street. Obviously, there's a method to the madness on how they're dispersing the crowd and moving them out. But you hear them giving that dispersal order, telling them it's an unlawful assembly, and getting them out of here. It should be mentioned, too, because earlier when there was talk of a dispersal order, it caught me off guard. We were over on the other side of the 101. I didn't hear anything, but we saw the movement of police officers. So it's not surprising that a lot of people were relatively caught off guard, knowing that they were here maybe until the curfew at 8 o'clock, maybe leaving a little bit earlier. But obviously, since things have ramped up, it has not ramped down to that point as we see police and sheriff's deputies continuing to move this crowd.
Okay, Tim, hang tight. We have an interview now with Deputy Chief from LAPD, Tingradis. Deputy Chief, are you there? And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Tingradis Imada? We might not have him.
Hello?
Oh, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Deputy Chief, thank you so much for joining us today. What are we watching happening here right now in downtown LA?
We have declared an unlawful assembly, and the Los Angeles Police Department is currently initiating crowd control tactics and trying to gain compliance from a group that has ignored a dispersal order that was provided. So what you are seeing on television now is Los Angeles Police Department, along with the Sheriff's Department, mitigate this large crowd. We are asking individuals to leave the area southbound Alameda to eastbound 2nd Street. I'd like to say that we started off with 20 to 30,000 participants at its peak, and the protest was peaceful. Not until rocks and bottles and projectiles were being thrown at our officers did we initiate crowd control tactics in an effort to bring peace and calmness to that area and protect the children and families and protesters that were there to express their First Amendment today.
Deputy Chief, we are, of course, watching this play out live in downtown LA, and protesters there right now might not be listening to this, but their friends and family members might be. What would be your message to relay to these protesters or, some of these bad actors that we've seen in downtown LA today?
My message would be to leave the area. The Los Angeles Police Department has been extremely patient today We have given direction in English and Spanish. We have allowed a proper amount of time for the group to hear this messaging and leave the area. Right now, the traffic jams, families are unable to come to and from. I am asking for the individuals to disperse and leave the area immediately.
Deputy Chief, can you tell us or explain to us what happened, what forced law enforcement to give this dispersal order around 3:45 today?
Sure. There was a crowd in the 300 block of Los Angeles Street, and they were blocking traffic and creating a traffic jam. Our officers were in the area, and there's a pedestrian bridge in that area, which was high ground. Those individuals had a position of advantage, and they began throwing rocks and bottles and projectiles at our police officers. At that time, the incident commander declared an unlawful assembly. We gave them an ample amount of time to leave the area. We then administered less lethal, and the crowd began to disperse. What you're seeing on TV now are splinter crowds and groups that are broken off from that main crowd, and we are trying to mitigate those groups with this second dispersal order that has been given.
We know that some of these officers, like you mentioned, had been struck with bottles, with bricks. Any officers that you know of at this moment injured?
At this time, I am not aware of any officers that have been injured. I would like to say we are working very closely with the Los Angeles Fire Department. We have a force protection of LAPD officers that are working side by side with the LAFD. They have need to go in on at least 2 locations that I know of to render aid to individuals. And when groups fail to disperse, it makes it very difficult for the fire department to do their job and render aid to those that need it.
Okay, Deputy Chief, have you noticed, is this 8 p.m. curfew working in your opinion?
I truly believe the curfew is working. We had multiple businesses in downtown Los Angeles that were burglarized and looted earlier in the week. Once the mayor initiated this curfew, we've seen a decrease in burglaries and looting. In fact, we have not had one burglary or looting incident in 4 days since the mayor instituted the curfew in the downtown LA area.
That is great news. What about the other protests that are going on? I know that they are largely peaceful. We're getting word that another protest is breaking out now in Van Nuys. When it comes to personnel, can you cover all of this? And have you heard of anything like this or similar to what we're seeing in downtown that may have been happening somewhere else in LA?
The Los Angeles Police Department is fully mobilized right now, which means days off were canceled. And with the partnership of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department and the California Highway Patrol, we have enough resources to mitigate the groups and crowds that you're currently seeing and watching on television. I am aware of different events that have occurred throughout LA County, and those events, my understanding, have been largely peaceful as well.
Deputy Chief Amada Tingarides, this is Giovanna Latta joining David Ono here on the set. I know that you have worked for many, many years to establish good communications between the citizens of Southern California and the department, the Los Angeles Police Department. Do you have any comments on what's been happening here over the last week in terms of maintaining good communication, an open line of communication between the community and law enforcement?
It is so vital that we are communicating. We, for the past week, have done extensive outreach. I'm currently the commanding officer of Central Bureau, and downtown Los Angeles is my area. And over the past week, we've had emergency meetings. We've met with our downtown business improvement districts, our downtown alliance, and our community members. And our main focus in communication with them is peace and safety for all communities. And we have utilized our social media platforms, emergency meetings, dialogue. Our senior lead officers have been going out to businesses, checking on them, working very closely with our city partners to get any graffiti removed from any buildings, and really pushing towards an effort to bring calmness back to our community, but also to ensure that they understand what resources are available to them in this time. And the messaging that we have put out to the community is that we see you, we hear you. The Los Angeles Police Department is here to keep our community safe, and we will get through this.
Deputy Chief, I'm going to ask you one more question, but I want to give you a reference to our audience. On the left-hand side, you see that is the crowd that we talked about just a second ago in Van Nuys. This is at Irwin Street and Van Nuys Boulevard. It is a peaceful protest, although they are in the middle of the intersection, but they are literally dancing. So that's what you're watching there. The pictures on the right-hand side of the violence that's happening right now in downtown Los Angeles. So, Deputy Chief, if this continues, if the violence continues and these problems continue for the next few days, is the LAPD prepared to handle it in a manpower sort of way?
The Los Angeles Police Department is prepared. We have an incident management team that has been with this incident from day one. We have coordinated with, again, Los Angeles County Sheriff, the California Highway Patrol, and we have enough resources to address what is going on right now in our city. The message to our community is we are doing our best to make the community safe, to keep our protesters that are protesting peacefully safe, but we also are not going to tolerate the small minority of agitators that are wreaking havoc and attempting to harm our officers and vandalize our communities. We will arrest you if you ignore our dispersal orders, and we will be enforcing the curfew.
Well put. That's an important message. The vast majority of people are trying to make a statement, a peaceful statement. It's only a handful of people that are creating the chaos that we're seeing. Deputy Chief, thank you so much for joining us today. Best of luck to you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Let's take you, okay, so that is downtown Los Angeles, and that's where a lot of attention has been. And Van Nuys, though, that is a peaceful protest in the middle of Irwin Street and Van Nuys Boulevard. The LAPD is there. They're watching them closely. They are in the middle of this intersection, so keep that in mind if you're driving through this area. But Giovanna, we've been watching them. It's not a lot of people, and they're literally dancing with a choreographed dance in the middle of that intersection.
Yeah, and I just want to note that earlier we heard from Tim Caputo. He's in downtown Los Angeles, and he was describing as tensions were building near his live reporting, and then someone came and brought a speaker with music.
Oh, yeah.
And all of the people who were focused on the tensions that were building between some of the protesters and the law enforcement out there then turned their attention to the speaker. And he said it changed the mood.
Yeah.
It just changed the mood and lightened the mood.
A lot of what we're seeing there in Van Nuys, hopefully that situation stays peaceful. We're going to continue to watch that. Downtown, as you know, and as it has been, that is a bit of a powder keg, and we will continue to watch the ebbs and flows of that. But then let's take you to a peaceful protest right now in Riverside, where this day was meant to be this way. If you have something to say, do it peacefully, and there have been thousands of places across the country where people have done so, including Riverside. And here's Rob McMillan with more. Rob?
Right, peaceful so far. Again, we have been here for about an hour and a half. Much different than the situation in Los Angeles. Obviously, what's happening downtown, tens of thousands of people. By our check with Riverside Police, there are about 5,000 people here in downtown Riverside. But the other thing that's different, this didn't start until 5:30. And once it did get started, it accelerated very rapidly. I've never seen so many signs, so many different signs with so many different messages. And what happened here was this protest started with all the protesters gathered on the street corners, and they would wait until the traffic lights would signal that it's okay to walk across the street. They would then do so, walk across the street. It appeared as though they were blocking traffic, but not really, because they had the walk signal. But then about half an hour ago, they started marching down the streets, blocking traffic. again, peacefully protesting, and I say that because we have not seen any instances of violence, and I just checked with the Riverside Police Department. They have not seen any instances of violence. One other thing that I should say about watching this protest compared to some of the other ones I've seen, some of the anti-ICE protests that we've seen over the past few days, a lot of Mexican flags here. I really have to say that predominantly it's just American flags here for this No King's Day protest. And a lot of American flags we've seen flown in the upside down position. Again, traditionally that would mean a country in distress. We've talked to a lot of people here. Most all of them are local, obviously with concerns with what they're seeing across the country right now. As is typically the case in these kinds of protests where people just start marching hither and yon, it's tough to tell exactly where the center point is, if there is a center point. From what the police department was telling me, a lot of people are beginning to gather at the Riverside Historic Courthouse, but it does appear that the crowd does appear to be dispersing at least a little bit. I did talk with Congressman Mark Takano. He's the Democratic congressperson from Riverside here. He's out here marching the streets, talking about, in his words, how ironic it is that we would spend so many tens of millions of dollars on a military parade in the nation's capital and so much money sending the National Guard and the U.S. Marines here, while at the same time seeing so many cuts to programs that many of the people here depend on. But again, here in downtown Riverside, a lot of noise, a lot of chanting, a lot of yelling, but so far things appear to be pretty peaceful. Although, as I mentioned, traffic is blocked on some streets, but there's been no unlawful assembly declared. There's been no orders to disperse given by the Riverside Police Department, at least at this point. I was checking with Officer Brian Railsback with the Riverside Police Department, and by their estimates, and again, they're monitoring the city camera system as well as drones they have flying in the area, about 5,000 people here at this protest, which is about half of what they had during a very large protest back in June of 2020 during some of the Black Lives Matter protests. Again, that was another situation that started around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Again, I'm talking about the one back in 2020. Almost 10,000 people there, and it did remain peaceful almost the entire time until that order to disperse was given. And then you had dozens of agitators in the crowd start looting businesses, breaking windows, and that kind of thing. But so far, we have not seen any of that in downtown Riverside.
All right.
Live in Riverside, Rob McMillan, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Rob McMillan, thank you for that live report from Riverside. Again, a protest there starting at 5:30. Rob saying about 5,000 protesters are there, and it has remained peaceful so far. And most of the protests we saw earlier today, throughout the day, have been peaceful. Tens of thousands of people were in downtown Los Angeles, and they were peaceful until the late afternoon.
Downtown Los Angeles was peaceful right up until about 3:30 this afternoon. All the other protests that we're hearing about, at least in the Southern California region, have been peaceful. I've heard great things about Pasadena. A great number of people showed up to that. It is still underway, no problems whatsoever. You see Rob's picture. He said a tremendous amount of signs, a very vocal crowd, but law-abiding, sending their message out there. But in downtown Los Angeles, the same has occurred that we've seen in multiple days since basically last Friday and especially last Saturday
and Sunday. And we are waiting to speak with Sheriff Robert Luna. He'll be joining us momentarily, and hopefully we'll be able to get some clarification as to what happened in around that 3:30 time period where emotions pivoted and the tensions began to grow. There were reports of some protesters throwing bottles and bricks at police officers. We also heard from Matt Gutman on the ground that he did not see that. He was not able to see that, but we have heard other reports, as I mentioned, that did happen. So we'll be hoping to get some clarification.
Yeah, we did. We get a little clarification from the assistant chief that it happened on the 300 block of LA Street, and it was a small group of people, but they had the high ground, throwing rocks and bricks at the officers below them. And that's when they told those people to disperse. They didn't leave, and so then that's when this massive dispersal order was given about 3:45 today, and the unrest began. Now, they've made a lot of progress, but they've used a lot of ordnance to do this, from gas to flashbangs and a massive amount of people and horses. And that is still underway. And the question remains, when the curfew kicks in at 8 o'clock, it has been working. Will it work today? Because today is that day when so much attention was put on today for the No Kings protest that happened all over the country. So perhaps there's an extra amount of energy that's going on here, especially in downtown Los Angeles. But you see the amount of law enforcement personnel that's out there right now to get things under control. On the right-hand side, a happier crowd at Riverside that Rob just reported from. And of course, we showed you those shots at Van Nuys of a small group of protesters in the streets that were dancing.
Yeah, and the No Kings protests were planned well before the ICE raids that began last Friday here in Los Angeles. Those were already in place because of the military parade that President Trump scheduled for today. We want to check in with Tim Caputo. He is still in downtown Los Angeles. We know you were kind of surrounded by some of that gas, the flashbangs. Are you okay? I should ask first. It looks like you're doing okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I cried enough tears today to last me for the rest of the month, for sure. What we're seeing here, it's kind of interesting because as we watch this play out, you obviously see all the sheriff labels on the back. This is obviously the sheriff's department here. They have been the ones pushing the crowd up Spring Street. Here's what's interesting. When you get to First Street over there, the dark blue uniforms are LAPD. Now, they are actually on both sides of the street of First and farther along. So what happened is when they moved the protesters up the street, or at least this kind of faction or group of it, the ones that have been kind of sparring with police and not dispersing for the last hour or so, they've run out of room. So if you look to my right here, what they're doing in the corner there is this is the remaining group. There's like a 6-foot, 7-foot fence there. From my understanding, this is a kind of like dirt, maybe construction area. I'm not exactly sure what it is. It sits next to Grant Park. Some of the group was moving up Grant Park up to Broadway. The others that came down Spring Street essentially ran out of room to go to. And what they've done is kind of squeeze the group smaller and smaller. So some of them are now hopping the fence and going up to Broadway. If you look up Broadway from where we are, it's a little tough to see with the fence there, but you see some of the flags waving in the background. That's how you get a sense of where the crowd has moved to this point. Whether or not the crowd, back up 1 second here. Sheriff's Department's asking us to back up. We're obviously not trying to get any more tear gas in our face, and obviously as they're shooting these flashbangs, what many of them are, you'll see them on the hip of some of these guys and ladies, is they're like grenades. So essentially they pull the pin, they toss them, and that's where you get the spark in the air when it releases, and then when it hits the ground, it explodes. It's not a grenade that has shrapnel in it, it's just a grenade that makes a big loud noise, and that's what they're tossing towards the crowd to try to get them to move back. The movement from here is going to be interesting because there are an awful lot of folks up on Broadway, but guys, as we've seen them move this crowd from Temple Street over to First Street, we've noticed it's getting smaller and smaller. The one thing I do want to point out, because I think it's important when we talk about the back and forth, there is a dispersal order, there's an unlawful assembly. Being out here right now is against the law at the moment, so that's why they're trying to move this crowd. We haven't necessarily seen, at least not with my own eyes, an awful lot of stuff thrown at police in the last 30 minutes. 2 or 3 water bottles. I have not seen rocks or anything like that, but here comes LAPD. It looks like they might be grabbing the remaining people who didn't hop the fence as they ran out of room in that area, pushed by the Sheriff's Department, flanked by LAPD. And what it seems like is happening at this point, I'm trying to get a vantage point, is they may be detaining the remaining people who are unable to hop the fence and get out of this area. Where they move from here, obviously we'll be following in tow and following close behind the Sheriff's Department to see exactly where they push this crowd. But obviously the tactics of the tear gas and those flashbangs seem to be working to not only push the crowd back, but eventually get them to disperse.
So are you saying that the folks that are there right now, that they want to disperse, but there's not an exit for them?
It looks as though, I mean, so we were obviously all the way up Spring Street as we were coming down, right, in front of City Hall. What we were seeing was they were pushing them this direction, but I could tell you on First Street, on this sidewalk, there's a line of LAPD. And now it looks like they may have moved. No, they didn't. So they're now making a smaller and smaller circle, essentially circling the wagon around the remaining protesters here. They pushed them into an area, the Sheriff's Department, where it was just LAPD, and it appears as though, it would make sense at this point, the folks who didn't hop the fence and get out of Dodge up to Broadway may be detained or at least pushed outside this immediate perimeter. We're trying to see, I don't necessarily see anyone in handcuffs. It does look like they're letting them go by police officers, but it was interesting because as the Sheriff's Department pushed them up, they were met by LAPD on the other side, and by the time they got to the end of the street, they were fully surrounded by police.
Tim, I want to interrupt you here. Stay there, don't go anywhere, but we just got word from LAPD Deputy Chief Imada Tingarides, whom we were speaking with a short time ago. She is telling us to tell our viewers that people should be leaving the downtown area southbound on southbound Alameda to eastbound 2nd Street. That is the route that they should take to leave the downtown area. Southbound Alameda to eastbound 2nd Street, and you're looking now at a map of downtown there to the right of your screen. So again, that is from LAPD Deputy Chief Imada Tingarides.
Giovanna, I can't see from above if there are any folks still down on that end over by Alameda Street. I can tell you, if you're on Broadway, good luck getting to Alameda, because as they've come through here, police officers are blocking all the streets. Alameda's like 4 blocks down from where we're standing. So obviously the federal building, the Metro Detention Center is Alameda and Aliso. That's where we've seen the protests. We've been here essentially every night the last week. That's where all the tensions began and where that dispersal order came in. As they moved the crowd up this direction, I don't know if they could get all the way down to Alameda. Here's the thing though, if they let them walk down to 2nd Street, excuse me, there's a chance they can get down the street, but from what we've seen from this vantage point, this kind of lively crowd, if you will, that were going back and forth with the sheriff's deputies both on Spring Street and on Main Street, they've been pushed up to Broadway and Hill in the opposite direction of Alameda. There may be a plan to eventually get them back down or over to 2nd Street, but at this point we've seen them move up the hill rather than down towards Alameda. That being said, this is a big crowd here. I know it was tens of thousands of people earlier. I can't exactly see if there are still lingering folks on that side of downtown, but I can say for at least this crowd, here they are here. We're watching them move up 1st Street. LAPD officers, some of them jogging up the street, and they're about to interact. Here comes another flashbang. Who is he throwing that at? But there's no one over here. So maybe that's just to give a little warning that stuff's about to go down. That was an interesting call by that one sheriff's deputy as they giggle about it here. But LAPD walking up 1st Street as they're about to approach the crowd up on Broadway. If the sheriff deputies let us go by here, we're going to work our way up to 1st Street and follow behind LAPD as they continue to move this crowd and disperse them. So we're going to send it back to you guys in the studio for a second while we move to the corner up here.
All right, Tim, thank you. And we should remind everyone, we heard from law enforcement, local law enforcement. We heard from Sheriff Robert Luna. We heard from LAPD Chief Jim McDonald. We heard from Mayor Karen Bass that people who are coming to Los Angeles to the different protests to protest peacefully, that they will be protected by local law enforcement, but anyone trying to stir up trouble, any agitators, anything thrown at police officers, or anyone putting anyone else in danger would be handled by the LAPD, and they seem to be doing that.
Since the dispersal order went out, then everybody has to leave, though. That's the clarification here. You can protest in other areas. You could protest in LA, downtown LA, and thousands of people did protest peacefully. But once the dispersal order goes out, then you have to leave. Your time is up. And the people who stay behind are basically in violation of the law. There are many other protests going on throughout Los Angeles. They are all peaceful as of now, and we've shown you quite a few, and we'll show you more throughout the evening. Rob is monitoring closely the Riverside protest that just got underway at 5:30 this evening. It has a great deal of energy and about 5,000 people there, but it is peaceful so far. Van Nuys, we saw a smaller group, about 200 to 300 people. They were dancing in the street. That is peaceful. Pasadena is said to be peaceful the entire time with a large crowd. So that basically is the picture. This is the area of concern. Once that dispersal order goes out, everybody has to leave. It doesn't matter if you're peaceful or not. And then the curfew then kicks in at 8 o'clock. So even though if you are still just in the area and out in the streets, you cannot be out there in that very specific area. It's a small area, but there's a very specific area that the mayor did identify, and according to the deputy chief, it has worked. There has been no looting, no break-ins, etc., since the curfew was ordered.
And to the right of your screen, you're looking at video from earlier today. You look at the number of people who were in downtown Los Angeles earlier today when the protest began late this morning and ended. It was supposed to end at 2 o'clock, and you would assume that everyone would disperse. A lot of people continued to stay in downtown Los Angeles. But the point being, the numbers of people who were in downtown and that protest was primarily peaceful, or was peaceful, until about 3:30 when that dispersal order was given. And we did hear from Bruce Thomas earlier today, who said because the curfew was happening at 8 o'clock, that maybe the LAPD wanted to start getting people to leave the area because there was still such a large group there. Much smaller than what you saw there, but still a significant number of people on those city streets.
That is not live. I just want to clarify. That's why we have earlier today, there. Yes. The one on the right is some of the unrest, and that's when it was just starting to break out. You see the energy really does change. You see CHP and LAPD making aggressive moves towards the crowds to get people to disperse. And as you can see, that's a 200 block of Los Angeles Street. So we have seen that evolve because of their aggressive maneuvering. It has worked, and the crowd largely has dissipated. There are still a few people out there, and Giovanna, we've seen this all the time. There's always that handful of people. By handful, I mean 100, 200 people that want to remain behind. They want to create disruption. I don't think you could identify them as peaceful protesters by any means. They're out there to create havoc, and that's basically what they do. That's their goal.
All right, and again, we're keeping an eye on what's happening in downtown LA right now. The smaller box on your television screen is a live picture, and again, the larger picture on your screen is from earlier today when those protests began to get out of hand.
By the way, we have there is a no-fly zone in downtown Los Angeles right now because of the Dodger game that is now underway. And so we have to kind of evolve with some of the restrictions that are going on. That's why Tim is our guy on the ground who has been watching the situation, and he's trying to examine what exactly that movement was that we saw just a second ago. And there again, on the earlier video on the right-hand side, you see the presence of horses. And from what we have been hearing, that presence has been really impactful in pushing the crowd back. And there's something going on right over there. You see the upside-down flags and a number of people with the police around them, but the disruptions continue in that area, and we'll get a report from Tim eventually when he puts himself in a position where he could report. Oh, there he is. Tim, what are we seeing back there? Go ahead.
Yeah, we're gonna walk with me here as we go up the street. LAPD just kind of gave us permission to come up First Street here. We're going to walk up to the side to show you what's happening at this point on Broadway. You know, it's interesting as some of these continued flashbangs go off here, they're moving the crowd from First Street over to Second Street. I keep mentioning that it's getting smaller and smaller, and understandably so. They're moving them kind of through the grid systematically up and around the street with LAPD, watch your step there, with LAPD kind of leading the charge with a line of police officers kind of pushing the crowd. Stay on the sidewalk, yep.
All right,
Two
Tim.
more steps up. Give me 1 second, guys. We just want to get possession. Yep. We want to send it back inside real quick as we're getting up to the corner here as they're pushing this crowd back on Broadway towards 2nd Street.
All right, Tim, thank you. We'll check back with you a little later. Right now, we have Sheriff Robert Luna on the line with us. Thank you for talking with us today. The protests today did remain peaceful until about that 3:30 hour. Can you tell us what changed? What happened?
Well, hello, Giovanna and David. Thank you for having me on. My understanding is that about that time, we had what I'm calling agitators start to attack police officers within that area where they ended up declaring an unlawful assembly and then gave a dispersal order. It's a shame because if you look at the entire day, it was peaceful, peaceful all day with families, legitimate protesters and demonstrators, and then you get these agitators that come in and they are well organized. They're armed with bricks and anything you could throw at police officers, and they start ruining it for everybody. They create chaos. And unfortunately, they are the ones that blew it for everybody, and it's a shame. because, as I've told all of you in the past, we encourage and facilitate First Amendment activity. But when it starts to become criminal in nature, as we unfortunately saw around that 4 o'clock hour, our deputies, our police officers start coming in. Your viewers are probably seeing some less lethal being utilized. The only time we are using those tools is when the deputies and police officers are being attacked. And I'm calling right now because I want to see how many of my deputies have been injured. I know that one of our horses was attacked, and that behavior is absolutely unacceptable.
Do you have a number of how many deputies have been injured today?
Today, we're still gathering all the information on any injuries and arrests that we're making thus far. Because we're still in the middle of this, we will get that to you here in the next, hopefully, an hour or so.
And
what are your concerns about later on tonight? The curfew kicks in at 8 o'clock. Not that that is relevant here because the dispersal order has already been put out there. But are you concerned about what's going to happen once sundown hits? Because what I understand is, and what was reported to us, is the curfew has been working, and it's been effective in protecting some of the businesses in downtown. But how do you view tonight?
Yeah, I applaud Jim McDonnell and the LAPD. I think they've been doing a great job with the curfew that they implemented in the city of LA. And I want to remind your viewers that we're probably dealing with about a 1 square mile area. I know it makes it look like everything's going bad. It is not. It's only that one specific area. You asked me if I'm concerned. My job is to be concerned. And because I am so concerned, as is Jim McDonnell and the commissioner of the CHP, we've been planning for this. We knew Saturday was going to be a bigger day than the last few. So we have brought in additional resources from each of our departments. We've been coordinating with other police chiefs from the 44 other agencies in LA County. I've been coordinating with the sheriffs in the area. We are checking with each other because a lot of us had protests today. And in our world, if you're not impacted, you become a resource. So we have a lot of people staged, and I'm really praying that we need none of them, that this continues to go the way it is, and we can get everybody off the streets, at least for tonight, and then everyone can go home safely.
Sheriff, for Angelenos who are concerned about the lawlessness they might see, that, as you mentioned, is contained to that 1 square mile area, but they might be concerned about the lawlessness and whether the people committing these crimes will be arrested and will be prosecuted. You were saying that you may not be arrested the day of your actions, but you will track these people down. Can you reiterate that and maybe comfort some of the people who are worried about this?
Yes, ma'am. I can assure all of your viewers that individuals committing crimes are going to be caught. They're going to be arrested. And I want to make sure everybody knows we've almost been running operations every day of people we're looking for to arrest that committed acts of violence or destruction of property or theft the days before. We end up getting a lot of evidence or tips. And we have a whole investigative unit that is doing that. But as you're looking at the activity today, we will arrest, and we have arrested several people already. And if they don't leave the area, and they have been directed to do this multiple times, they are subject to arrest. We have additional booking teams from the LA County Sheriff's Department out there. We have set buses out there ready to fill them up. I'm hoping we don't have to arrest anybody, but unfortunately there are people who are not cooperating. They are not listening to the direction of the deputy sheriffs and police officers out there, and they're going to be held accountable. One other piece of this, I have had a constant communication with the district attorney, Nathan Hochman, who's been a great partner, and he has assigned a couple of special prosecutors just for people who are doing this kind of unlawful activity. So he's ready on his end. I've also had conversations with the U.S. attorney, who is very eager to charge people federally for either attacking police officers and deputies, or being in an organized fashion to create the chaos that we're seeing right now on television.
Is there a point where you draw the line and you say you have to be gone right now or arrests are underway? Do we get to some point where that happens tonight?
That's already happened. LAPD declared an unlawful assembly. They're giving dispersal orders, very clear and concise, over and over, giving people an opportunity to leave. If what you're seeing now are people that are masked up and actually, instead of walking away, a lot of them are charging the lines with the officers. Those are not peaceful individuals. They are not protesting or demonstrating. Those are criminal acts. So we have to make sure that we get those individuals out of here somehow, and if that's through arrest, that's what's going to happen.
Earlier, there was some question as to the folks who were still out there who were trying to leave the downtown area as to what the best way was to leave. Tim Caputo thought that maybe some groups of people were surrounded by police and couldn't find their exit. Anything you can add about that?
Yeah, LAPD, I think, has been doing a very good job of putting out very specific direction over text and any which way they could to communicate that to the public. And I believe they're trying to get people out of there through Alameda. But here's the thing, some advice for people that are out there. The officers out there will give very clear direction on how to get out of there. Do not join these crowds that are attacking the officers. And I see people who are out there just videotaping. Maybe they want to get on YouTube or whatever they're doing. Don't do that. You're putting yourself at risk. Get out of the area as soon as possible. This has already been declared an unlawful assembly. There's no going back on that, not tonight.
Yeah. We've seen a tremendous amount of manpower out there. Of course, the hope is maybe this is the climax of all that's been going on. A lot of attention was given to this Saturday. But if it does continue, can you sustain the manpower?
We have no choice. We will figure out a way to make sure that we can bring peace back to these streets. We are consistently coordinating, like I said, in the region and our partners around. But I do want to say this. Our employees are tired. Our employees have been working their tails off. Our employees have families that are scared to death as they're watching this on television, and they would like them to be home. And I hope we all think about it. Some people say, well, that's your job. It is to a certain extent. But I do want to acknowledge my employees and the sacrifices they're making and their families. If you can just imagine for a second having to send your husband, wife, son, or daughter to work, and then they're out there on these lines and these skirmish lines, that's a scary place to be. I get it. It's scary for everybody. And if I didn't say this to both of you earlier, I want to really acknowledge the fact that our community is in fear, that in our community there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of things going on. Every time we turn around, we're seeing these ICE raids in the strange places, car washes, swap meets. That scares people. We're acknowledging that. But the violence and destruction of property is not going to get us to where we need to. It's the peaceful demonstrations and protests that hopefully will make a difference, and we find a path go in the right direction here, because this is not good for us, for any of us.
Sheriff Luna, before you go, I do have another question. You guys are responsible for the entire county of Los Angeles, aside, and we've been reporting that most of the protests, all of the protests, have been peaceful throughout. Can you comment on the other protests that that your department was overseeing, and tell us about that?
Yeah, we were expecting well over 30 protests in the county of Los Angeles. I am happy to report that at least half of those that have occurred earlier today ended very peacefully. They didn't have these agitators in there that turn things ugly like you're seeing here in downtown LA. We are still monitoring everything that's going on, including the soccer game at SoFi Stadium with Mexico versus the Dominican Republic. So there's a lot of things going on out there, and our staff here at the Emergency Operations Bureau and everybody we brought in is doing an amazing job of tracking everything, ready to respond and assist and keep the peace for the entire region. And we do that 99.9% of the time. We have amazing employees.
There's another soccer game in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl.
Tomorrow.
Oh, that's tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
I believe that is tomorrow, and that is something we'll be keeping a close eye on as well. This Pasadena is also in Los Angeles County.
Right. Hopefully that will stay peaceful. Sheriff, your time is valuable. Thank you so much for clarifying with us with what's going on in our county. The best of luck to you as you continue on.
Thank you. If I can ask for prayers for all of our employees out there. It's been a rough week, and it's not going to stop anytime soon.
Right.
Without a doubt. Thank you for your service, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Sheriff Luna, clarifying what is happening throughout our county. Largely good news. Let's clarify that. Most of the protests have been very peaceful, but there's a big responsibility in what's going on downtown. There has been this dispersal order. The people that are not dispersing, that are not leaving, arrests are now underway. You just saw, that is a live picture on your left-hand side where you see officers who just detained somebody on the far side of that vehicle. That's what they're doing, is they're pulling him into that vehicle. He might have done something specific, but technically, all the folks that are there right now are in violation of the law, so they could be arrested if law enforcement chooses to do so. But this person that they're trying to put into custody right now in that vehicle, we don't know what he did. In fact, we understand that Tim Caputo now has rejoined us. Tim, can you clarify what we're watching here?
The vast majority of police officers we saw moving in the opposite direction from 1st Street to 2nd Street. We're closer to Temple. We were going back to the car to get some waters and change our battery, and we came up on this side as LAPD are moving this much smaller crowd away. And as we were walking up, there were 6 or 7 LAPD officers trying to restrain that man who is now in the back of that SUV. We don't know what he is accused of doing. We do know when they went around him immediately, there were several other people standing kind of over the group of officers, so much so they had to call for extra officers to come up the street to essentially back them up. The crowd on the opposite side, 5-10 times bigger than the one over here, but as you guys have seen, it may only take one person, 2 people, a handful of people to interact, have a negative interaction, potentially assault police, and it could lead to this. Again, we don't know exactly what this guy's accused of doing. When we came up the street away from the large group of officers down that direction, he was already in the ground kind of wiggling around as they were trying to handcuff him. He obviously didn't go into the car very easily, and obviously you see a couple people in the street right now kind of standing face to face with these LAPD officers. That gentleman there in the kind of blue bandana has been yelling at police for a little bit. That's why they've called extra backup. Actually now we're seeing a lot more LAPD officers come up the street as well. This group size is far smaller than the big group that they're pushing out in the opposite direction, past 1st Street down to 2nd Street. They want to move from 2nd to Alameda, but what happens is we're standing next to Grant Park on my left here. That's City Hall. That's where we were about an hour ago as they were moving the crowd. Will point in the direction here so everyone could see it. 1st Street down to 2nd Street, but what ended up happening is a lot of people came up through the park, through Grant Park on here to Broadway. So that's why you're seeing these officers again. They were blocking the top of Grant Park here, and now they're pushing this remaining crowd. It's maybe only 20, 30 people out towards past Temple Street. Obviously, in every direction, there are little pockets of crowds as they're trying to disperse them. But even if a crowd as small as 10, 15 people can turn ugly, can turn violent, and can end in arrest like you just saw there.
And Tim, your camera pushed in on a woman who was sitting on the street there, apparently refusing to disperse.
Yeah, you know, and you see a bit of this. I remember seeing this Friday night as well, is, you know, this road is not open to traffic anyway, but this is an attempt at some peaceful resistance to police. The problem is there's a dispersal order. And so what's going to happen is if she doesn't get up and walk, she's going to spend the night in jail, and it looks as though she made the right decision there.
Yes.
And she got up and is walking away as police are pushing them down the street and kind of getting this remaining crowd, at least on this side of the larger group, this is a much smaller group, out of this area near City Hall.
All right, Tim, thank you for covering this for us. I know you're going to gather some more information that's going on downtown. We want to let our viewers know that we have a special newscast on Eyewitness News on ABC 7 at 8 o'clock, another one at 10 and 11 o'clock. 8 o'clock, of course, is in relation to the end of the football game that is on right now. But we are going to come back on the air and give you the very latest on what's happening all over Southern California and the nation for that matter. There's a lot of major news stories that are happening as we speak. So we're going to break away from our coverage digitally, and we'll see you at 8 o'clock on ABC 7.
This has been Eyewitness News with breaking news.